Congressman Khanna of California is a member of both the Oversight and the Armed Services Committees. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. And we're going to get to the investigations in a moment. But first, what's your reaction to the president's tweets over the weekend?
Well, it's completely unpresidential. Instead of assuring the nation about what happened in New Zealand and saying we condemn those kind of hate crimes, he's tweeting out defending anchors on Fox News. He's yelling at GM CEO as if that's going to bring jobs here. So it just was totally what you wouldn't expect from any president of the United States.
What message does it send when the president is so outspoken, so upset over for example, the Fox News lineup or Saturday Night Live, but not, as you point out, the hate that fueled Friday's attack on Muslim worshipers?
And it's unprecedented. Look, when George W. Bush was president after 9/11, one of the things I admired about him is he said this kind of hate against Muslim Americans has no place in America. Rudy Giuliani did this. When our nation has crisis or when there's international crisis, you always have the president speaking about American values. And this president was silent about that, and it was noticed by people across this country, Republicans and Democrats.
The president's defenders refute the idea that his rhetoric plays any role in stoking white supremacy. How do you see it?
Well, he's encouraged violence. I mean, he's openly speculated, saying that he doesn't know what will happen if his supporters get more rough. Words have consequences. Certainly the words of the President of the United States has consequence. The President criticizes members of Congress for speech and says that has consequence. Under that own standard, he should accept responsibility for his words. And he hasn't grown in office. I had hoped he would have a different demeanor as president than on the campaign. And hopefully, I still hope he'll learn the gravity of what he says matters.
So how do you explain the president's latest approval rating in our brand new CNN poll? Now it's gone up, edged up a bit. He's at 42% job approval. 89%, though, look at this, 89% of Republicans approve of the job he's doing.
Well, I'd say two things. I looked at that poll. 56% of people still think they're not better off than they were 3 years ago. And that is, of course, the famous question, are you better off? So while some people may think that the economy is doing well for places in this country like Wall Street, it hasn't helped ordinary folks. It hasn't helped the forgotten Americans. And I also think it's a concern that a lot of Republicans haven't called the president to account for ongoing crimes or abuses of office, and that's a concern to our democracy. I hope more Republicans will speak out about that.
Let's turn to the oversight work that House Democrats are conducting, including yourself. Your colleagues on the House Judiciary Committee set today as the deadline for their sweeping documents request 81 people and entities. Now the chairman, Jerry Nadler, says many have, in fact, complied. What are the consequences, though, for those who are refusing to comply?
Well, the consequences is a potential subpoena in a far more hostile environment. My hope is people will realize their constitutional duty, their duty as patriots to come back and offer the information they have. They're not sharing it with some partisan committee. They're sharing it with the American people. And I'm heartened that so many people have complied. And I think we're going to find out a lot in the documents that the committee has.
Your committee, the House Oversight Committee, has clashed with the White House over a request to interview former Trump administration officials, including the former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly. The chairman of the committee, Elijah Cummings, says the White House is stonewalling. How does your committee plan to respond?
Well, I spoke to Elijah Cummings just last week. He doesn't want to issue subpoenas. We've tried to get the documents about these security clearances, but the White House just is not cooperating. So we are going to have to issue a subpoena if that's the case. And this is an issue that should matter to the American public. I mean, you have a case of people at the White House handing over possible information about Saudi dissidents to MBS, compromising national security. We need to know who has these clearances, why they have them, why they were given.
Who do you plan on subpoenaing?
Well, I think we can subpoena John Kelly, who wrote a contemporaneous memo opposing the security decision, the decision to grant these clearances. Why did he oppose those? Why were these clearances given over career officials? And I think we have to understand from Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump why they got those security clearances. That's not partisan. I've worked with Jared Kushner on issues at the White House Innovation Office, and I've praised the White House Innovation Office. What I don't understand is why he has access to the president's daily brief and why he's being able to get that kind of top secret information when our security officers and career officials didn't want him to.
Why haven't those subpoenas been issued? At least not yet, because as you know, some of your critics are already suggesting it's simply an empty threat.
Well, you know, anyone who knows Chairman Cummings, and Mark Meadows or Jim Jordan would tell you this, he's one of the fairest people. He wants to do things cooperatively. That's his modus operandi. He does not want to issue subpoenas unless he absolutely has to. But he's also one of the toughest people. And so if they continue to take advantage of the situation when he's bending over backwards, to be fair, we will issue subpoenas. But he's giving the White House every possible chance to comply.
Are you worried, though, about a court challenge potentially if those subpoenas are issued?
I do think it will go to the courts, but I think the courts will clearly rule in our favor because there's no executive privilege here. There's not some top secret national security issue about why random people were given security clearances. If anything, what we ought to do is get this information so that we can strengthen the laws in Congress so that the President of the United States isn't allowed to just arbitrarily give security clearances with our most sensitive information to whoever he or she chooses. And that's the real oversight function. So I'm confident that the courts would rule for us.
Congressman Khanna, thanks so much for joining us.